Where we last left off, Paul and Barnabas had been commissioned as missionaries to go and share the good news of salvation of Jesus Christ. Where it begins by saying the same thing happened in Iconium, meaning what has happened to them in previous locations they were at. It's happening here again. Paul and Barnabas went to the Jewish synagogue and preached with such power that a great number of both Jews and Greeks became believers. Some of the Jews, however, spurned God's message and poisoned the minds of the Gentiles against Paul and Barnabas. But the apostles stayed there a long time, preaching boldly about the grace of the Lord. And the Lord proved their message was true by giving them power to do miraculous signs and wonders. But the people of the town were divided in their opinion about them. Some sided with the Jews, some sided with the apostles. Then a mob of Gentiles and Jews, along with their leaders, decided to attack and stone them. When the apostles learned of it, they fled to the region of Lycaonia, to the towns of Lystra and Derbe and the surrounding area. And there they preached the good news. They're facing this opposition, and so they decided to spend some more time there. Despite facing massive opposition, they continued to preach the gospel. Why did Paul and Barnabas decide to keep at it when the circumstances became more difficult? Because what Paul and Barnabas knew to be true is what I'm about to tell you, and that is this, that we've been called to persevere. As Christians, as the church, we've been called to persevere. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." They define perseverance very simply as it means being persistent despite the difficulties or delays we face. The Bible teaches us to persevere in faith, trusting God to fulfill his promises. And when we face difficulties, we can trust that God understands our situation and sees our distress. And when we feel like giving up, taking time to remember God's faithfulness can strengthen our resolve. Who once said, "You may have to fight a battle more than once to win it." Sometimes you don't always win. But perseverance isn't necessarily about winning. It's about growing into the person that God has designed you to be. It's about becoming and growing into the likeness of Jesus Christ. Elijah challenged King Ahab and the prophets of the pagan god Baal to a contest. Baal never showed up. Elijah bent down to pray, and the living God did show up and ignited that altar in flame. It was just soon after that the queen, Jezebel, threatened to have Elijah killed. And so he fled. He tucked his tail between his legs and he ran as far as he could. Didn't care where he was going. He just got out of there. I mean, having your life threatened by the queen is a trial if I've ever heard one, isn't it? Someone's threatening your life. That's a trial. And after being fed by an angel in the desert partway through his journey, he makes it to the mountain of God, the same mountain where God appeared to Moses so many years before. And what God was communicating to Elijah was this. Basically, he was telling Elijah, you need to persevere. You are not the only faithful one. You are not alone. And I still have work for you. I am not done working in your life yet. I am not done working through your life yet. And know this above all, Elijah, I am with you. And Elijah continued to serve as prophet for several years after that, until God sent a chariot of fire from heaven that came down and picked him up and then took him right back to heaven. Elijah the prophet never died. And I'd like to think that being spared of death and being taken to heaven was Elijah's reward for his perseverance. Maybe, maybe not. But I think we can learn a lesson from that story. We've been called to persevere. And we need to know that because we're often tempted to give up. So instead, depend on God to get you through the circumstances of life. And know this, God will show up. God will show up. And if you're walking closely with him, you will know it when he does. Isaiah We've been called to persevere. We need to know that because we're often tempted to give up. And so instead, depend on God to get you through the circumstances of life. And know this, God will show up. And if you're walking closely with him, you will know it when he does.